Are live with Susan Palumbo, author of Skin Thief and Countess. Hi, welcome to the stream. How are you?
I am wonderful. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here with a interviewer in Trinidad.
And
Um,
yeah, yeah. I'm
it's
from Trinidad.
yes, I am also from Trinidad, but I believe you're there, right? Or am
Yes,
I?
I'm
Are you
here.
not? Yeah. So this is very exciting for me. I'm excited for this
Mhm.
interview, and I'm also awkward. So
Well, it fits. It works. We'll be awkward together. How about that? How does that sound?
yes.
Yeah. Okay. So, what do you want to talk first? Do you want to talk Skin Thief or you want to talk Countess?
What would you like to talk about?
We could start. We can definitely start with Skin Thief because I enjoyed every single story there. I do have my faves, but I did want to walk through them with you.
Okay.
Right now, Skin Thief. Let's get the. Why do I keep misspelling? I forgot. It's as though I forgot how to spell thief. Right.
It's
So
a
the
tricky
blurb from, yeah, it's a tricky word, especially when you're spelling it all of the time. So,
one.
Skin Thief by Susan Palumbo. The stories in this collection of dark fantasy and horror short stories grapple with the complexities of identity, racism, homophobia, immigration, oppression, and patriarchy through nature Gothic hauntings, Trinidad folklore, and the heart of the collection lie the questions. How do we learn to accept ourselves? How do we learn to live in our skin? And it includes these stories: The Pull of the Herd, Personal Rakshasi, Her Voice Unmasked, Of Claw and Bone, Propagating Peonies, Killjar, Tessellated, Laughter Among Trees, Apolepsy, am I pronouncing that correctly?
Yeah, Apollo PC.
Apolepsy, A
Yeah.
Descaling, Tara's Mother's Skin, The Bride, and Duen. So that let's talk Skin Thief first. What
Okay.
inspired you to create this collection?
So, um, I'm a short story writer, and I started writing short stories. And when I started writing, probably in 2015, I was writing stories that I thought that the mainstream North American market would like. Um,
Right.
and that was good, and I did have a bit of success, but they weren't stories that I felt were reflecting me. So I went back and started thinking about writing stories that reflect how I feel about myself. And I started
Mhm.
having a bit more success, not necessarily in getting into large magazines, but more when people read the stories, they really connected with them. And so I spent probably from 2017 to probably 2020 publishing these stories. And I noticed there was a theme of shape shifting throughout. It wasn't planned. I just sort of looked back on my work and thought, oh, there's a lot of shape shifting here. I must be working out something. So in 2020, I said, okay, I have enough almost to put together a collection. So I wrote the last story, Dwen and Killjar, put them together and then ordered them in a way. It was all sort of unconsciously that I had written these stories. Some were in Canadian English and some were completely in dialect. So I kind of ordered them in a gradient and put them together.
Right.
And then I said, let's see if we could sell this. So that's how I did it. It wasn't something that was very planned from the beginning, it just sort of evolved.
Right. You do deal with issues like immigration,
Mhm.
right? And the stories themselves, we'll get into my favorites and so on, and I can square and fangirl appropriately. But a lot of them are about becoming, and not
Mhm.
necessarily becoming something. Some of them are not exactly about becoming something new, but about finding your authentic voice,
Mhm.
which leads me to my The Killjar. It
Mhm.
felt very reminiscent of like an Edgar Allan Poe. Of course, you grew up on the classics, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And so it's like Edgar would have read this and be like, damn, I wish I had seen that one coming. Right? Like, so she had her name that was her name, but she had the name that her father gave her, and then she became that person.
Mhm.
Then that is, and sorry, we ended up talking about what was my favorite anyway. Let me do the proper, correct, professional interview thing. Um, which one of these stories you felt represented like your personal experience as being, Canadian and Trinidadian?
That's a hard question, and it's going to be probably the darkest story, Laughter Among the Trees. It's kind of a lot of what happens in that book. Obviously, I am not a shapeshifter. I'm not a mermaid. I'm not a deer. I'm not any of these things. But a lot of the feelings and some of the events that happen have happened to me. And
Right,
Laughter Among the Trees specifically, I came to Canada with my mother when I was very, very small, like preschool age. And my sister was born
right,
here. And I mean, the story is fictional, so, um,
right.
take all of this with a grain of salt. Um, but I did feel that kind of out of placeness. Um, my mother never really assimilated to Canada. She still has the accent, and she spoke dialect, and all of our family spoke dialect. And I was in a kind of secluded community where it was only Trinidadian and other Caribbean people. So I kind of didn't fit in with the other kids here, and couldn't explain why. And my father said to me, it's because it's a funny story. He said it's because you ate your first plantain in Trinidad, so now you are that. You will never truly like be diffuse and assimilate because that's what you did, right? So I've always been kind of in two spaces. And it's funny, even the Canadian, like the kids of people who immigrated here but they were born here, they always say to me, you were born here, were you? And I'm like, No, like people can tell." So that story really illustrates that sort of feeling of not belonging, which I felt a lot growing up. Especially, I'm much better now.
So that was the Killjar,
That was Laughter Among
epilepsy.
the Trees.
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
after Among the Trees. Epilepsy, a descaling, right?
Hmm.
That
Hmm.
that was a flip of the trope. It flipped, the otherness to humanness that had been going on throughout the book. Because
Hmm.
all the other characters started off human or believing that they were human, and there was this the mermaids, and
Hmm.
and there's this one of them that was becoming less mermaid and more human, and it was
Hmm.
so scary, and it was they don't know what to expect. It was this life that they were going to go off and live, and they just weren't fitting in there anymore.
Hmm.
And I thought that was such a clever that she did. You want to tell us a bit about that, about writing that and what that felt like for you, like your inspirations and so on?
So yeah, you nailed it. The other part to that is I wanted to. Everybody knows the Little Mermaid, the story, and in the Little Mermaid, she makes a choice to become human because she see Eric, and she's like, I need to change for this man, right? And I wanted to do The Little Mermaid, but not if it was a choice that she was making to have a relationship with somebody, but if it was her destiny or something that would happen to her. So it wasn't a choice; it was part of who she was. So that's where that came
Right.
from. I also two things happened to me while I was writing this story. I had someone very, very close to me um become ill. and I was taking care of them. And so, when someone is ill and you are taking care of them, obviously you love them, but you're also dealing with your own sort of issues around taking care of them and how do you feel about that, and you don't want to visit that on them because they are dealing with their own issues, rightly so. They don't need to deal with you and your emotional problems or whatever it is. But I kind of wrote it out a bit, like, some of the frustrations. It's obviously not a one-to-one correlation, but
Right.
some of that is in there. And also I had a very, very close relationship end at that time. So it's also about, having
Mm.
someone who is really, really important to you, who is part of your life, slowly drift away from you and having to deal with that process. So it was a lot of personal things as well as the Little Mermaid.
Because it was like the perfect reverse Little Mermaid. Because in the Little Mermaid, she changes to have a relationship with someone versus
Exactly.
reverse Ariel, where they're leaving a relationship and becoming, more human at the same time. So it was like a complete,
Exactly.
it was complete reversal. And I think you did a really, like, you're mentioning that, and there are all these feelings that come with caring for someone um who's ill. I'm a parent, so I've had to deal with that a couple of times with my own children. And it's, and you do have your feelings, and you do have your um not so much insecurities, but there's a grief that comes that you have to deal with. And well, I'm happily married, so I don't have to deal with it alone, but at the same time I'm still dealing with it. And he's
Mhm,
also dealing with it because it's his children too.
mhm.
But that grief and the way you encapsulated it, and you married the two concepts of someone drifting away as well as caring for someone who's becoming ill. I think that was very, very well I almost broke down with that one. The emotion, it was very, very emotional. It was a very, very emotional read, and I was grateful to have read it because it felt so akin to many of my experiences. I grew up with a chronically ill father, and
Mhm.
eventually passed away, and it was difficult, but I got to see that. I got to see that. Not just, I mean, we speak on, we chit chat on Twitter all the time, but we never get in depth, and these are my experiences, and but at the same time you were able to encapsulate the things that I have yeah, thank you so much for writing that as well.
You're
Yeah.
welcome. I think, a lot of people, when they are on Twitter or when you're a writer, a lot of people are focusing on, well, what is my word count? And how many places am I submitting to? And where am I getting accepted? And I'm doing all of this stuff, right? Which is part of the business of writing. But the core of writing is to write out an experience and hopefully connect with somebody else so that they feel seen. Like that is the art,
Right.
to make
The
people
art part of
feel,
it. Yeah.
right? And I
Hmm.
sometimes feel that as writers, and I'm talking about Twitter specifically, when you're on Twitter, that kind of gets lost sometimes in the business part. So thank you for reading
Hmm.
it. I'm glad it helped you or felt you feel like, yeah, that happens to other people, because it definitely does.
Yeah. um Laughter among trees, apolapisi. I'm going to forever be mispronouncing that one.
You know what? It's a Greek word, so it's okay. I had to learn how to pronounce it too, and
Pronounce it
it's
as
not
well.
pronounced how it looks. It's like apolopisi. It's Apollo.
Apolapisi. Apple.
Yeah, and
Oh,
and
so
it
it sounds
means,
kind of Italian. It has an Italian feel to it.
yeah, it's not English, and it's not something I made up. It's a Greek
Yeah.
word.
Two things I want to talk about. First one, Tara's, actually the last three that's listed here on the blurb on Amazon. Tara's mother's skin.
Hmm.
The unnaming of Tara's mother. They could not remember Tara's mother's name because she had transitioned. Right? How did you? Talk to me through that one. Talk to me through that one. Like that
Okay,
specific.
this is gonna okay, this is gonna sound weird. So I went to a wedding when I was a child in
Right.
Trinidad. My family still lives in Siparia area,
Okay.
south. Um, so I went to a wedding, and at the wedding, there was a woman, and we were there for a month or two, and the woman was an older woman, and she was doing all the stuff, you know, the ceremony stuff for the wedding, helping everybody, doing all of these things. And I asked, okay, well, what is this lady's name? Because nobody was calling her by her name, right? And I
Oh,
was like, "Well, what is this lady's name?" And nobody knew her name. They were just calling her, and I just lifted this. They were just calling the woman Tara's mother, and I was like, so my whole life I have thought about this woman who was running all this stuff at this wedding of my uncle, and nobody, like, people didn't refer to her by her name because they didn't call her by her name, and that has stuck with me my entire life, that, like, what was that woman's name? She was so important to the functioning, and that is a kind of thing that we have where we don't call people by their name. We'll call them by a nickname, or we'll call them by, oh, this lady's auntie, or this lady's whatever, you know. And it
right.
always stuck with me. So I kind of took that and put it into a Sukunyant, which maybe isn't too complimentary, but she was a lovely lady.
Well, I'll tell you something, and because I feel like you're hitting the nail on the head. I went to a PT after I'd read Skin Thief. I had to go to a PTA meeting in my son's school, and
Mhm,
I couldn't remember my last name, and they referred to me as my son's mom. It's so and so's
mhm,
mom, and it to the point where she had asked me to call someone for her using her phone. And I have the phone and I'm scrolling and I'm seeing my name saved as so and so's mom.
mhm,
That's not my name. You know my name. I've filled out numerous forms of my name on it. And there's also what is considered the erasure of women as they get older, where
mhm,
women talk about becoming invisible, as Madeline Matlock speaks about, older, where you become invisible. And it's that erasure from society while you're still here,
mhm,
right? And I felt that that was so well encapsulated because Sukuyans are considered to be older women. You know, you have an older woman in your village and you have a Sukuyan also in your village, your suspicion falls upon said older woman. And by removing her name from the collective consciousness of everyone. I thought that was a complete stroke of mastery. I was like, wow.
Well, I mean, is that is the culture though, right? I didn't completely make that up. That is
Right,
how,
yeah.
like, that is how I saw things when I was a child. So, and that figure, I mean, I really love Trinidadian folklore. I think it's so interesting because we hear so much
Mm,
about, and I'm not dragging anybody else's folklore, but we hear so much about Greek folklore. We hear so much about Norse mythology. We hear so much about, Irish things. We have a very, very rich folklore. And it's not just one or two little stories. It's quite robust how many characters and different little practices and rituals and all kinds of things that we have. And so I I just, you know, a sukanyans, I grew up with that. My mother really believed in that and terrified me about it a lot. So, I wanted to write stories about those things that were important to me. I wanted to see our mythology, and not because when you come here, sometimes, people be like, don't talk about that. That is from over there. And they try to, like, forget those things and don't bring it up. But I think it's I don't know, it's just so wonderful that we have our own stories. So I
right.
started writing them, and Tara's mother is one.
Yeah. You spoke about we have all these, you said no disrespect to these other things, but that was our introduction to mythology. Our
Hmm.
introduction to like we just thought a sukuya was a sukuya. It's just,
Hmm.
old people, old folks' tales. But
Hmm.
our introduction to Greek mythology and Egyptian mythology and Irish mythology and the because some of us grew up on Enid Blyton, so we knew about fairies and goblins and
Hmm.
you know brownies and all of these other characters, and we enjoy them. And this is where when I see authors complaining about a push for non-traditional non-Western mythology, I'm not pushing yours aside. Do you not think there's work out there now that I will go and read. I have it on my TBR. I love it. I'm not
Hmm.
gonna not read it. I'm not gonna not enjoy it. I just want to enjoy other people's folklore as well. Right? I want
Yeah.
tell me the stories of jinns. Tell me the you have personal rakshasi as well, right? Talk to me about the
Hmm.
rakshasas, and there are Pakistani authors that are writing about their folklore and their mythologies and so on, right? And they're incorporating their history as well, even with the Miss Marvel
Oh yeah.
Marvel
Yeah.
cinematic, where Iman Vellani did what she did with her character, with her Miss Marvel, right? Where they
Hmm.
incorporated the separation. Oh my God, I can't
Partition.
believe I forgot the partitioning. Yeah, the partitioning of Pakistan and India, and how that affected their family from a historic point of view. They wove in their mythology, and to me, it was one of the richest, most rich and fresh takes that I've seen in mainstream media, and I thought it was beautifully done. I thought that was well woven in, and it's like I just want to see that. Right? You don't have to be of. It doesn't have to be Trinidadian or anything, but it just feel free to tap into someone else's culture and enjoy, right? And yeah, I think you did a really great job. I keep saying that, but I did say I was gonna fangirl
I
because I
mean,
love
that's
Skin
fine. You
Thief.
could continue to say it.
You did a great, like, I think you did such a fabulous job on Skin Thief. Oh
Thank
my, like,
you.
it reminded me of, when I first picked up Poe, Edgar Allan Poe, and I thought it
Hmm.
was so, smart and, polished
I
and
love
educated.
Edgar Allan Poe, so
Yeah,
that
yeah,
I'm a goth. We're a goth.
yeah.
We're goths tonight. So
Tonight, you see the black lipstick. I
yeah.
didn't want to overdo it on the eye makeup, but, yeah. Um, You had mentioned where it was encouraged that you leave certain things behind. For example, you don't take certain myths to Canada where you were, which was portrayed very well in your novella, Countess. Mm.
This is the
Uh,
controversial book.
This is a controversial book. Talk to me about Countess.
Countess is a really I really feel like I lived my life to write this novella. Um it is advertised as, what did I say it was? Queer Caribbean, um anti-colonial space opera Count of Monte Cristo retelling. Um but it's all those things, but it's really, earlier you had asked about what really represents me in the story collection. Obviously, I'm not a space captain. Obviously, I'm not saving the world or trying to do rebellion. I mean, tiny rebellions in my own way, but not large scale rebellions. But I
Mm,
feel like this book is more my experience as an immigrant. And I say immigrant, and I always feel weird when I say immigrant because, like I said, I came here when I was very, very young. But it's that off feeling where it's like I don't actually feel like I'm part of this place, but I've been here so long that I don't know what to call myself. So I feel like Countess is really about the sort of person who has grown up in a in a country where their parents have immigrated and grown up being fed all of the things that are great about that country, and then slowly realizing that, hey, all this that I was working towards is not exactly true. I don't know if that
Right.
was your question, but that's what the book is to me.
Right. I mean, it was a question, and you answered it.
Mhm.
um, da, da, da. Because you had touched on it was practically illegal. They couldn't even send money back to their relatives. They couldn't contact their relatives. They couldn't bring their religion. They couldn't go with. They couldn't have charms even in
Mm.
Countess,
Mhm.
right? Julie Mango features very heavily. So let's ask the real question. I think all my viewers are wondering: Starch or Julie? Starch versus
Oh,
Julie.
Julie.
Julie, good, good, good. I have a Julie mango tree in my front yard, just so you know. Just so you know.
Is
I
it,
was raised right.
I kind of want to be like, is that a real question? Like,
I mean, it's a
do
real question in
people?
the sense that it has a question mark at the end of it.
Yeah, because
It's playful, you know.
it's
For
always Holy
example,
Mango. I don't know.
it's a mango. My neighbor says the only mango he doesn't like is the one he doesn't have.
Hmm. I
Right,
really don't the mangoes we get here, we don't get those too often. We get the Mexican kind. I don't know, it's not
right.
really mango, it's a different kind. So we don't really get those here. But in Trinidad, I know when I go and it's that season, everybody has a bunch. Oh, he likes the starch.
Starch for life, yes. Right?
For live for life.
For live, yes. Starch to live, starch for life. I mean, which works out in a marriage because he's not going to touch my Julie and his starch is safe. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's
It's
good.
about that balance, finding that balance in life. I like mango. I love mangoes, and I think because I grew up with a Julie mango tree in my front yard, I have access to Julie mango tree. Obviously, makes sense for my favorite mango to be a Julie. But if I'm somewhere else and it's a Doodloos or a Calabash or a Cutlass mango or something, obviously that's going to be my new favorite because it's what I have, right? Because we also don't
Yeah.
discriminate. I mean, it's a real question, Julie versus starch, because if I have both and I want to give you one, which one do you question? You know?
Oh, I thought you were asking me because I was always I would just always choose Julie. Like to me, it's not a question because the default answer is Julie. Not why are you asking me this? It's just
Yeah, no, 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 I
what?
know, I know.
You
Yeah.
didn't give me choice. There's no choice here. But
What's the
okay.
choice?
I mean,
All right.
obviously
Yeah.
everybody has their own taste and they're allowed to have their own taste.
Yeah, the correct answer is Julie Mango, or you're allowed to be wrong. That's fine. You don't owe me
Yeah,
good taste, man.
exactly. Exactly.
Um, I did. Okay. Actually, I should have read the blurb for Countess. I have my notes up here, so I don't wanna mess that up. Right. This beautiful cover that you had. Who did the art for this?
This man's name is Matt Griffin, and he, if you want to see other examples of his work, uh, he did the Dune covers, you know, the reissue of Dune. So
Oh
he did all. I
yes.
know when they got this man, I was like, "Are you what? Are you serious? You got this man to do it?" So if you look up Matt Griffin,
Yeah.
Matt, and then Griffen art,
Okay.
you will see all his stuff and you could see the kind of influence, the desert planet kind of thing.
So I'm gonna read the blurb of Countess, a
Mm-hmm.
queer Caribbean anti-colonial sci-fi novella in which a betrayed captain seeks revenge on the interplanetary empire that subjugated her people for generations. Verica Samaru lives in a colonized space under the Asabot Empire, much like her ancestors before her in the British West Indies. After years of working hard to rise through the ranks of the empire's merchant marine, she's finally become first lieutenant on an interstellar cargo vessel. When her captain dies under suspicious circumstances, Verica is arrested for murder and charged with treason despite her lifelong loyalty to the empire. Her conviction and subsequent imprisonment set her on a path of revenge, determined to take down the evil empire that wronged her, all while the fate of her people hangs in the balance.
You have a good reading voice.
Thank you. So I finished this book this morning.
Oh, you okay?
I am fine. This book took it did what it was supposed to do. Hi Paula, you see I tagged you like you
Hi,
asked me
Paula.
to. Yeah, Paula specifically asked to be tagged when for my interview with you for a
Oh, yeah, I
conversation.
know Paula. Me and Paula are friends.
Friends, right? Good. Okay, so let's get back into this book. So my girl is like she starts off and she's such a bad bitch. You know, she's commanding, her forces. She's taken over for her captain, for her mentor. She's making sure. Yes, I did get some because I wasn't gonna come here overly tired and be that brief conversation. We got sleep and we got coffee, so we are double insured. We good. Yes. So
Hi, Paula.
back to yeah, back to me simping over. Verica starts off as this bad bitch, right? We love a bad bitch in
Mm-hmm.
this house. Um, yeah, she is just taking charge. She goes back into port. She meets her sweetheart. They do their thing. She goes back to her mom. Mom making roti. That's mom making roti and curry and whatever she want. That is such a scene that I think almost every Caribbean parent, every Caribbean child who is visiting home or who's had a guest come over can understand that busybodiness. Okay, I'm making all of these things because we have someone in the house, and in this case, it's Verica.
Mm-hmm.
So what are some of your favorite dishes? Like roti and curry features very heavily in this. So
I didn't write all of my favorite foods. But I like roti. I like, you know what I really like? Tomato choka and saltfish. That is my favorite food. I don't get it too often because someone in my house is allergic to fish, so we don't eat it. And but when
oh.
I get it, oh my gosh. Saltfish is like, I don't know, it should be it's like food of the gods. I don't I eat it all the time. So I didn't put all of it. But I do like curry. I'll eat dal and rice. I'm actually not
Mm.
too bad at making roti. I didn't start when my mother is always like, I learned to make roti when I was 9 years old. They had me learning to make roti. I didn't have that, but I did learn as an adult. So yeah, I mean all of this stuff in the book I like. So I wrote about it. And I wanted to write about it specifically because how many books do you see with that kind of food in it?
Yeah. And you see it in a lot of people of color,
Literary.
brown people, but yeah,
Mhm.
right. Food features very heavily in Jordan Fueco's books, especially
Mhm.
Ribiera, the first one.
Mhm.
I was reading that and I had to look her up. I was like, is she Trini? Is she like some Caribbean diaspora?
Is
She
she from
uh, she has she
Barbados?
has a but she's Nigerian.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but because of the way plantain was featured, so Emperor's Feast basically, it's the royalty and the servants walking around with trays of fried plantain,
Which is our food.
which is our food. right? And that
Mhm,
is how fried plantain should be served on a
mhm,
platter, right? Piled
mhm,
high, right?
mhm.
And so, like, you find the way food features in our, and I'm saying our BIPOC literature is different, especially when it's not sent like in white Christian. I'm saying white Christian, but white and Christian, because you can be Christian without being white. Um,
Mhm.
if it's around Christmas, well, yeah, you're getting your spread. You know what I mean? You're getting your ham, you're getting your turkey, you're getting your mac and cheese, your mashed potatoes, you have a spread, but it's centered around an event. Versus for
Right.
us, an event is
You come
tomorrow.
over. Yeah,
Yeah,
when I go to my mother's house, like sometimes I'll just go there. I'll be like, I'm coming on Saturday. This woman will start
right,
from, okay, so I'm coming on Saturday. This woman is starting on Thursday. And I'm just passing by. I'm not doing anything. It's not anything where it's like a whatever. She's like, okay, I'm gonna take out the chicken. I had already seasoned it, but it was frozen. So now I'm gonna take it out and thaw it out, and then I'm gonna go and prepare. Like it's a 2 3 day thing, and these are just. It's just because I'm coming, and it is
right.
their way of showing care.
hmm Yeah, because
Um,
food hits like multiple love languages. It's an act of service because cooking is a process, right? It's a gift because you have the item in front of you prepared, right?
mhm,
It's and not just that, and especially when you look at it as a gift, um, it's made with thought, it's made with care, right?
mhm.
It's made with like my preference is I love tomato choker and baigan choker,
Oh yes.
right? Choker, yeah,
I'm a
eggplant.
choka fanatic.
Yeah,
I will eat any choka.
choker and roti is life, right?
Oh,
I have my preferences, but if I go by my aunt, well, my mom's abroad, but if I go by my aunt, she will make my what I like, right? She'll make sure she has
exactly.
shatine, right?
Mhm,
Especially for Diwali, she has shatine there. She's like, listen, that's your share right there, right?
mhm.
It's that thought process that goes into curating an experience, because I'm sure if somebody else that she also loves does not like these things, because my aunt is allowed to have friends with wrong opinions as well, right? Because I'm so gracious, right? What she's going to make for them is going to be different than what she's going to make for me. And this is my bestiest bestie of all
Hello.
time. Every day you're alive is a celebration, Mom Mats. Correct.
It's true.
Correct.
But
Yeah.
that you are correct in that when I say I'm coming over, she asks me, "What do you want? What you want me to make?" And I feel like, and I'm living in Canada, right? When you have a celebration, generally around Christmas, Thanksgiving, Easter, they don't ask you what you want to eat. They make a set menu, and that's what
Right.
everybody eats, right? But
Eats.
when we do it, you will say, "Oh, I know this so and so is coming. So I'm going to make this for them because I know she likes it. And oh, this one is
Right.
coming. So I will make sure I have some of this for them." So it's very individualized, I find. She will
Yes.
cook different foods for everybody. So when you sit down on the table, it's a lot of food. It's very different.
Yeah. And you just take what you and
Hmm.
I think like okay, so when she's arrested in front of her mother, by the way, that hurt. And I know it hurt Ver and what do you think hurt most? What do you think hurt Verka most? Being arrested in front of her mother, or just being arrested? That her mother had to
Oh,
witness that, or being
it's
arrested?
her mother. It's the mother thing. Because, and I said this
That
book is
hurt me.
very, mm,
Yeah, that I was so hurt. I was so hurt on Verka's behalf.
because
I had to keep reminding myself. I was like, this is a work of fiction. This is a work of fiction.
I grew up with many women, aunts, my
Right.
grandmother, um, and I mean, respect to your fathers too, but it's like, oh, you don't disrespect my mother. I feel like
Right.
that is something that it's like very, very, you go fight with me, don't bring my mother into it,
Yeah.
right? And they brought her mother into it, and when that happened, she lost her mind.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Like it was personal because of her goals, but then it became personal law.
Mhm. So you
Right?
wanna fight with me, okay, but not that lady. Leave that
Not
lady.
her. Not
Yeah,
her.
she might bother me. She might be annoying sometime, but you don't get to
Right.
say that. Only I get to say that.
That's my job. I get to be I'm the hardest thing her life needs to experience.
Exactly. Leave her alone. She likes to cook. Leave her alone. So yeah,
Right.
that's very much me and my mother. I mean, obviously not one to one, but very
Right.
much, my feelings of how we treat our mothers generally. Obviously, not everybody, but
Right.
it's a cultural thing.
Yeah, it's definitely cultural. So moving through the book, I want to touch on the names of some of these ships. That these are very Trini and Caribbean inspired place names and so on. For
Mhm.
example, the magical
Are we
planet
doing
Ocas.
spoilers? Are we doing
No,
spoilers or no?
I think your book was only launched last week. This one.
You, yeah, last week.
Yeah, let's not do spoilers. Let's not do
Okay.
spoilers. But uh, I did have. Where is it? Where is it? Could you help me? This
The
is.
Pomerac, the Calabash,
You had places like Sando,
mm-hmm,
right?
Aria,
Um,
Bacchus.
ha- right, Bocas. Where am I? How do I pull up my notes? I keep forgetting how to do this. I had done some of the place names. Trumaka,
Mm-hmm. I
Toko,
took
St.
those.
George. Yeah.
I took them off the map.
Yeah, like you took these and not just that, there is a I worked in the hospitality industry. Okay, and
Mm-hmm.
so a lot of Caribbean and tropical imagery is considered luxury and it's sometimes priced out of the reach of locals.
Mm-hmm.
So that, and I looked at it and there was the same it was very that was happening where you have all these planets, you know, and all of these places and all of these ships that are beautifully named after um that are Caribbean, particularly Trini inspired, right? And you have that, and these people can't access the resources of it, and it comes down to and it. What was I gonna say? Yeah, so you have all these people who are living in these areas named after these things, and they can't access or benefit from the resources that they are creating.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and it became and in count you mentioned it was like a Count of Monte Cristo retelling, but the count had it was the count who had his own uh, revenge, his own person. She had her revenge. This was also almost like ancestral revenge because Tus, Tusad,
Toussaint. Yeah,
Toussaint,
Toussaint.
Toussaint,
Haiti.
yeah,
Haiti. Yeah.
yeah. And I think that the fact that you launched your book and that we're having this interview so close to Republic Day, right, which is when we shed our final vestige, the final control that Britain officially has over us. And I say officially, obviously, right? It was so close to us, and we're having these conversations throughout the US about Haiti. I think we forget how important Haiti was to us becoming emancipated from slavery and how Haiti has been suffering for so many years. And this feels like maybe it's in the future, but maybe they can get their reparations for what they went through, right? Their revolution and so on.
This is, I think, so we're not doing spoilers, but I think
It's
this
at
is
the end of the
where,
day, it's your book. It's your book, and if
no, no,
you
but
would
I'm
like to
not going
drop
to do
us,
them.
right,
I will address this because I think this is the crux or the main difference between my book and Count of Monte Cristo. Count of Monte
right,
Cristo is a 1,200-page book. Okay?
right,
So that's a very long book. And
right,
obviously, a person who is writing a novella is 150 pages, 160 pages. It's not going to be a beat for beat retelling of his
right,
personal revenge. But I did not want to write a book about personal revenge. The book is
right,
anti-colonial, right? And you
yeah,
got it completely when you said this is not a personal revenge. This is a story about sort of a people. It's personal when it begins. When it begins, you said
yes,
they are jealous of, they have bad mind. It's blight everywhere, right? Don't want her to do well. They're jealous. Then it crosses over to her mother. Then she realizes, no, this is not just a problem for me. This is a problem for all of us. All of
all of
us
us,
are in a situation where we are being subjugated and exploited and treated badly. So she shifts and she goes to, well, do I go and look out for my own personal revenge, or do I care about my people? And I put Haiti in the book specifically because
hmm,
it 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 is, I don't see how anyone can talk about um freedom in this part of the world, or the abolition of slavery, without referring to them and their revolution and how they became the first free democratic um state, Afro state. And
hmm,
I feel like today I watched a video and they were just, the man tweeted these horrible things about the Haitian immigrants, and I'm like, they're still getting it. They're still being dragged for it. And it's like it I can't even talk about it because it makes me so upset that people in the Caribbean were treated so badly. And yes, we have come a long way and we're not in that situation necessarily that where we were. But I don't want to write a book where I pretend it didn't happen, kind of.
hmm, and
It makes me
also
upset.
it was very, very upsetting because I mean, we go to school. We when we were in school, we covered Caribbean history. We did Caribbean history as opposed to only
Mhm,
Trinidadian history or so on at the
mhm.
secondary school level up until Form 3. However, I think it's as I got older, as I delved a little bit more into history, I have friends um, who have been doing deep dives into history. And when you listen to them, you cannot talk about Trinidad. You cannot talk about, for example, things like the Sidela population and so on. These are hallmarks of our history without referencing Haiti, right? And then um, to have these awful things said about them, which turns into severe bullying, which turns into racial profiling, which turns into, you know,
Violence.
injustice, injustice and violence and so on, and to not have it referenced, to have it constantly erased, right? It's an injustice not just to Caribbean people or descent or you know any of the diaspora, right? It's an injustice to Africa themselves. You know, the things that they experienced firsthand, right? Um, and to ignore it, in to just ignore it is to just like a lot has happened with the death of that gentleman. masala, like a lot of things are happening. It's feeding into that, trauma that we experience, right, through history, that historical trauma. It's just adding and it's just compounding. We had the Haitian Revolution on Earth, according to in your book, and then we are in space, and it
We're
was
doing the
like
same
Star Trek
thing.
was promised, and we ended up with Dune, right? Like what they said, we keep thinking billionaires don't want Star Trek, they want Dune, and this is what happened in your book. It was such a authentic take um, on capitalism, for example, in addition to all of that, because that is what happens. And it was such, and to see how the military, because this is where she was in the military, and to see how that was weaponized to create these embargoes, to pay these people low wages, right, to not have good working conditions. Because you mean to tell me they couldn't put filters down in the mines? They couldn't equip their workers with appropriate, and then to tell them that they needed to be grateful for that, or we're going to stop giving you aid. Maybe I wouldn't need aid if you were paying me a fair rate for my goods.
Right.
You
And
know,
it's very interesting your reaction to it because that's where I'm coming from. Um,
right?
but one of the commentary that I have gotten from many people is that,
Mm-hmm.
oh, racism is very, very, the oppression is very, very heavy-handed in the book. Or um, why did I stick to writing about race? And my answer is nothing I could write is more heavy-handed than reality. Everything
Mm-hmm.
I have written in that book has happened or is currently happening. And I love Star Trek. You could see the Star Trek influence in the book. There are like, little scenes where, I love Star Trek. It's not like I don't love it. But I wanted to write something that felt like the truth. And I wasn't going to show up and write a book where it was like, I'm going to present, oh, we get spaceships now, and so racism is over. Like, can you tell me the equation where the increase in technology, right, is somehow liberating people? We have more technology now than ever, and people are still being oppressed. They are being put on death row. We have technology to prove that someone did not commit a crime. And even though we have that technology, the person is still being put to death. So I want to understand where everyone thinks in the future, just because we have developed technology, that all of a sudden it's going to be a post racial society. I want someone to explain why we don't talk about that aspect in the future. Why do we only focus on class? I mean, not only there are books that do focus on race, but the pushback I have gotten is very much I am too heavy handed on oppression. And my response is I am not heavy handed enough.
Mm-hmm. I think you're right. I think you're right. Because if George R. R. Martin can take scenes from history and write Game of Thrones and be considered a great writer, and he
Yeah,
is, the man is great, and he is obviously inspiring the rest of us to pull from our histories, right? Um, to do the same thing, right? And is it
right.
heavy-handed? Is it heavy-handed to have a character be called a dog because they have a bit more melanin in their skin, or is it heavy-handed to actually experience a politician, a former president, lie about you eating cats and dogs, eating people's pets, not even eating animals raised for consumption, but
Right.
stealing and eating people's pets? Was that not heavy-handed? Or yeah, damn right about the heavy-handedness, right? And sorry. Sorry about that frog in my throat. Yeah. Yeah. Is it Is it heavy-handed to experience it firsthand, or is it heavy-handed to read about it in a book, in a fictional book?
This is the issue. This is the thing. There are people who there and I'm not naming names, but there are people who they want something more nuanced. And and I'm like, I think this is very nuanced. I don't know
You did have a lot of nuance. You did have a lot of
I don't know
nuance.
what you're talking about. But it is interesting, but it doesn't bother me personally. Like when they say these things, it doesn't bother me because I know who I wrote it for, and I know that they will get it. And I know that lots of people are gonna say all kinds of things like, oh, this, that, that. It doesn't matter. The book is for the people who need it, and I know there are people who need it because I needed it.
Right. Yeah.
I'm all
And
fired
then
up
too,
because this book
there's the
makes me
conversation.
very ready to
How do you expect readers to be excited about it?
yeah.
Hi, John Francis. He's on Facebook, saying,
Hello.
"Hey, hi, darling, how you doing?" Um, yeah. And the thing is, she didn't even go for revenge. She went for reparations, right? She didn't institute heavy embargoes. She asked for fair wages. She asked for good, she asked for fair wages. She asked for fairness. That is what she
Yes.
asked for. Like it wasn't even about revenge. It was about reparations. And it wasn't
Hmm.
actually wasn't even about reparations. It was literally about fairness. Just pay us what we deserve, right? I'm not gonna need you for aid if I can afford. If you pay me right, I'm not gonna need that, right? And I loved how everything coalesced in the end. And I'm not gonna get into spoilers. One, because we're almost at an hour. We can go for talking forever if you're down for it. But
We can talk for a bit more.
yeah.
I don't have anything to do. It's
Uh,
nighttime.
yeah. So we've spoken about reparations. We've spoken about her quest for what started off as revenge, and it melded into reparations because she realized it wasn't about her. It wasn't personal. Because if it was personal, she would not have been thrown in jail.
Exactly. And
If it was
and
personal, yeah,
that is where the book veers from Count of Monte Cristo.
right,
It and I acknowledge that. Um,
yeah, yeah.
that's a
I think
fact.
it was great as opposed to doing a beat by beat retelling or a beat by beat version of, in the future in space and female and queer and whatever, um, veering away from it because different people are gonna make different choices.
Thank you. Hello. That is what
Different people
character
are gonna
is. That is
exactly.
what character is. If I go somewhere and Bob Jones goes somewhere, me and Bob Jones are going to have a different experience. Unless the people are very, very aware of how they treat everyone, I move through the world differently than Bob Jones. So we may start off with the same premise, right? But plausibly for me to end up at the same destination as Bob Jones is very highly unlikely. You
Right.
got it. I'm
Yeah.
very happy.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I do try to read deeply. I try to read analytically, even while I'm reading for pleasure. And the book was a pleasure to read, but it was also like if you give me the buffet, I'm not just gonna take pizza and meat and a better salad. I'm
Mhm.
gonna try to sample everything, try to get as much, extract as much enjoyment out of it as possible. And I'm aware that people won't always do it. I don't always do it. I'm not going to pretend to be, Miss Intellectual and I read everything deeply all of the time. But I do try to put, like, where's the author coming from? And I know you're Trinidadian, and I know, and I had no clue what to expect when I read. I knew I was going to read Countess. I was waiting for that to drop. Up until I read Skin Thief, I had no clue what to expect. I had no clue what to expect of it. of the writing style and so on. And I was just so overjoyed to see like modern noir, modern gothic, right? And you know, right? And it was
They're
a
very different. Sorry, I interrupted you.
no. Go ahead, go ahead.
They're very
They're very
different
different.
books.
Hmm.
They're not the same. I mean, it's still me, but it's
Right.
very they're very different. Like one is more of a horror folklore, and there is some kinds of there is a horror. There's a bit of like the way Countess is told is a horror arc. It's very internal about what she thinks and what she feels and what is going on. But they are different, completely different genres. I'm going back to horror after this.
I'm not like horror sci. Okay, my top four genres are sci-fi, fantasy, mystery, and horror. So
You know what
whatever
I
you
want?
write, I'm fine. What you want?
Oh, I
What
gotta
you
do
want?
it. I wanted to try something different because I felt like I did all these stories and I needed a palate cleanser,
Right.
do
So this is
something
what
else, and
Countess
then
was.
go back. Yeah. I couldn't keep doing the same flavor. And not that the stories are all the same, but I was doing a lot of horror short stories and I wanted a little bit of a break. But yeah,
Yeah.
I'm just so excited. Like you like yeah.
I could see like Countess does have series potential. It does have series potential. I'm fine if it's a standalone. I'm perfectly fine if it's a standalone. But I'm like I saw the potential. I'm like, you know what?
Many people have asked me or said, "Give me more," or "Why didn't you write a novel?" or "Why isn't this long?" or "Can I
Nope,
have
nope,
more?"
nope, nope. We need to take
Um,
Countess and we need to have that Countess the banker. So if like you want to return in 2 to 5 years, like okay, fine. Let me give these hoes a little something, That's great. That's wonderful. And if you don't, it is still it's still a beautiful standalone, you know?
oh, thank you. I was actually in a meeting. It was just a like a happy meet and greet meeting with the publisher this morning. And they asked me, somebody at the publisher asked me, "So, did you consider writing more?" And when your publisher asks you, right, you don't want to say, "I would never write anymore," right? But I haven't, I have
Mm-hmm.
ideas. I know the world is big enough. Like the world is big enough. And that part of the story, we have another part that happens, like, something happens at the end of this book and there
Right,
are characters who are continuing, right? So I could
right.
do something with those characters, or I could, but I haven't sat down and plotted anything out or anything like that. So I said to them, I'm working on a novel right now, but there are things I could do. I have not made any definite plans, but they they asked, so that's good.
Yeah, I got to the end of it and I'm like, I think it was typical. Oh my goodness, this is the worst part of the book, the ending, because there is no more.
Well,
Not because
I mean,
not
I
that it was wrong. It wasn't wrong to end it where you ended it. Again, it was like leave them wanting more. Not oh my god, the story isn't done yet. Versus overwriting and over. I'm so grateful you did a novella. Like you let the story tell itself and be its own length. You know, as
did.
opposed to pushing it into novel category. Like, listen, this is what it is. This is the story, and that, and I mean, it's your brand. That kind of authentic storytelling, right? It is your brand. So if it could only be a novella, then no, it was meant to be a novella.
Yeah, I had no aspiration to write a 400-page book or a 1,200-page book. Um, I felt like this was like, when it was like how we tell stories. When somebody is telling you a story, right? That it's not going on when they don't tell it that way where it's like a very long, drawn out. okay, and I was here. It's a very like fast pace, and there's jokes, and there's oh, and then I went here, and then she said this, and then you know what happened? This happened, and then I've gone by them, and like it's kind of like that. It's a faster pace generally. So that's what I was going for. I wasn't going for Tolkien. I'm not Tolkien. I'm not the Dune man. There nothing wrong with those people, but I am Susan from Trinidad, and I'm
Right.
not going to tell a
Yeah.
story that way.
We appreciate George and we appreciate Tolkien and we appreciate, and I'm probably gonna, do a reread of one of them, right? And I'm gonna enjoy every single one of them. But I'm not gonna pick up Susan and expecting to see George or
No, not George.
Frank.
I am definitely not that, and
You're
that is
Suzanne.
part of
Mhm.
and that is part of also why do I have to mimic other people, right? We're writing our own stories. We are coming up with our own things, so they should be the way we feel they should be told. I don't need to copy nobody. Trinidadians do not need to copy anyone. We can make our own things, and the things are fabulous. I don't need to follow fashion anybody.
Yeah. So what before we wrap up, there
Mm,
was where are you? Where are you? Where did you go? Don't be too far. Right, Skin Thief. I wanted to talk about Dwen.
okay.
I want to come back to Skin Thief
Mm-hmm.
and I want to end it on that. Dwen, trigger warning, involves the loss of a child and of moving on, both of said Dwen and the people that grieved. Uh, that was, I mean, as not just a child, weighs heavily on should, as it should. What did you have any specific actually two children were lost throughout Skin Thief. There was Laughter Through the no Duan,
Yeah.
correct? Did I get it right?
Mm-hmm.
Good.
Yeah.
I was hoping I didn't mix up the titles. But it
No.
was a moving on, not just of the mother, father, not just of the move on from the death of their child by giving up,
Mm-hmm.
but also the child moving on after death
Mm-hmm.
and from the perspective of the child. What is it that you wanted to write a story about Duans, or the fact that the child became a Duan means that automatically we're talking about grief is a major theme in that story?
I think I think you're dancing around the question, do I have any personal experience with that type of loss? So the answer is no. With
Right.
that specific type of loss. Um,
Hmm.
but just generally being alone, being grieving over other deaths, not of a child necessarily. Yes, I have felt that. I am fascinated with this figure in our folklore, the Dwen. And I was chatting with RSA Rhonda about this folklore, and I grew up with it. And but I didn't know where it came. I knew vaguely that it comes from, if you have a child and they're not baptized, and if they pass away, they will turn into a dwen.
Right.
Um, that's what I understood from the story. Um, and I've when I was told the story as a child, it they're more of a trickster figure, or they're more of a they'll lead you into the forest by calling your name and you get lost. And for me, it's always whenever we talk about our folklore, it's like, oh, that's a othered character, the child who has turned into a dwen. But that backstory of having passed away is really tragic. It's not just a creature that is just tricking you. It's a child who has died. So I wanted to sort of delve into that, because to me that's a really sad thing behind the folklore. Um
Right.
and I wanted to humanize that, because if you hear the story, it's
Mhm.
just, oh, that I've heard people tell jokes, and it's like, what's that noise? And it's like, oh, it's just them Dwen playing in the yard, and it's kind of funny, but if you think about it, it's really sad. So I wanted to kind of humanize that figure, because obviously it may have happened. I mean, these things are from the past, and it may have happened that somebody lost a child, and this developed from that. So I wanted to give that a face, not just be a monster, because children are
Right.
not monsters.
No, they're not. Um, Honestly, I wasn't answering around the question, but I was leading to the question. If it
Mm,
was like a study of grief.
mhm,
However, because for me, Duane is such a tragic figure, right?
mhm,
Baptized. I have my feelings about it, and I've been attempting in my own self to reimagine these characters. These are characters that came mostly from like indigenous peoples and from Africa and so on. And you're talking about cultures that predate Christianity. So, how is baptism helpful to prevent a
mhm.
child from becoming a Duan? So, I was looking into, or how is the sign of the cross going to stop Elijah Bless, right? And
Mhm.
that pre-colonial look at these characters was important to me, and because the child in question wasn't an evil child. Yes, they caused some harm, but they caused harm with their childish understanding of the things that was taking place around them, right?
Mhm,
Even the dog was grieving the child's loss, right?
mhm.
There was a bed in the home that was not going to be used anymore. Of course, her cousin could use it, right? And for some people, not everyone, for some people, that death cleaning, getting rid of the things that belong to this person that they're no longer using is therapeutic. It's part of the grieving process. It's part of the healing process. Sorry, not grieving. It's
Mhm.
part of the healing process, right? But this child, in their childish knowledge, was not seeing that, and because they're stuck at that age, at that stage in development, that they wouldn't know. And there was something like for me reading it, I had to find myself understanding the character themselves, stuck, frozen in
Yeah, because
childhood.
she is a child, and she's very young. So, she's not going to, and where does she have to go? Who does she have to talk? Okay, she does find somebody to talk to, but she doesn't
Right.
have any solutions. You are left alone, right? And so she is very, it would seem that she's like irrational and angry and all of these things, but she's a little girl. And if you're a little girl and you're in a situation like that, I would be upset. I would be like, why isn't my mother paying attention to me?
Yeah. Yeah.
I
And
have
why is mom
the
giving away why mom's giving away my good bed, my good pink bed, my
I
bed that was
know,
made
and I had
for
to put
me?
myself back into being a child to write that. Like because I had a bit of a temper as a child. I still have a temper, but it's more controlled. But I had a bit of a temper as a child, and so that is very me channeling the angry little kid. Why didn't I get what I want? Kind of
Yeah.
thing.
And they want the things that they're supposed to have. She wants her mother to love her. She wants her mother. She's missing her mom's affections, for
Mhm.
example. She wants to lay down in her bed. She doesn't want to live out in the yard and up in her tree. She wants her bed. She wants her mom. She wants her dad. And it's that I don't want to say injustice. I mean, it's not injustice, but it's definitely unfair. This poor child
Mhm.
has to navigate this alone. It was such a heart wrenching story to read. That aloneness. You're not even. I mean, it's one thing to be human and alive, alive and stuck in the mortal realm. Imagine being dead and you can't even communicate with, you know?
Right. Yeah, that is where that story came from. It's like it is such a tragic figure, that character, and
Mm,
it's like I feel like they deserve a backstory where they are not a monster. So let's give them an internal
yeah,
interiority. Let's hear what they're thinking. They're not just trying to lure you just because they're bored. They've died and they're a
yeah.
child. Yeah.
And they just want somebody to play with, you know? They just want to play with somebody because that's what children do. They want to play. Wow. You have two amazing, amazing bits and pieces of work. You have shown what it's like to be a Trinidadian, you know, the Eastern Hemisphere, you know, uh, moving through the U.S. and well, not so much U.S. but Canada, and
Mhm.
like you've written, like you've poured so much of yourself into these books. Uh, oh, my bestie with a word. Fear was a great tool of early Christians that aided in conversion, thus doing baptism stories, but the origins are mostly of the first people. So they were first peoples are not, um, yeah. So yeah, so my bestie backs me up. So I'm right.
That's a good bestie. Keep her.
Yeah, for life. Yeah, so you did pour so much of yourself into these books, and I'm grateful because there's an authenticity there, there's a freshness there. Yeah, you deal with death and you know the themes of death and so on, and it's something we must all face at one point in time or the other, um, both secondhand and first-hand experience. But yeah, you poured so much of yourself and you brought such a fresh take to it in both books, in Skin Thief as well as Countess. Um, what's next from here? What's your plan moving forward?
I'm writing a novel. I already have the first basic draft, and
Right,
it's, of course, it's Trinidadian. It has something I cannot let go of that. But it takes place in Toronto, and it is related
right,
to um the Pitch Lake. And I can't tell
right,
you about it, but there is a connection between, I mean, you guys know this, you live there, right? So Trinidad
right.
pitch, right, was the first pitch used to pave the streets in New York. It's from Trinidad. So there is a connection there that I'm going to
Hmm.
write about in this gothic
Okay,
horror novel. I wanted to write a book set in Trinidad with the Pitch Lake, but I felt that it wasn't. I felt like I had to go there and stay for a bit and get the feel there, and I haven't been back home in a long time. So I felt like, you know what, I'll put it in Canada, and instead of
hmm.
like going and doing some foolishness and getting it wrong. So I just set it in Canada, but I have the connection, and the connection makes sense. So it's going to be a Trinidadian Canadian gothic novel.
I love it already. I'm gonna end this stream here. Susan, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you. Appreciate your books.
Oh, you've been so
Appreciate
lovely
the
and
conversation we
so
have, not just.
gracious. Thank you for having me. You said you were afraid to ask me, but you shouldn't be afraid of anything. You see, I'm just a goof.
I my first show that I did, I asked a good friend of mine, somebody, my husband and I love and respect dearly, and I said, "Listen, why am I so nervous?" And he's like, "I don't know. Why am I nervous?" It's like, "Okay, we'll just be nervous together." And as soon as we started, we forgot to stop.
No,
So
you've done a
it's
lovely
always that
job. You've
initial
had
fear.
fantastic questions. This is a
Thank
pleasure.
you.
I hope many people come and talk to you. They should. It's a great experience.
Okay, my authors, you've heard my ringing endorsement. I am recommended by the wonderful Susan Palumbo. Please let me interview you. Let me talk about your books. Let me love you in person. Well, online, but like
Yeah, I get it.
like this. Yeah. So I will not be hosting next week. Consider it my mid-season break. I do have something that I would like to do, and I got the opportunity, so I'll be dealing with that next week. And the week after, though, I will have another author for you. I have Meredith Mooring, who is the
Oh,
author
Red
of
Site.
Red Sight. Yes, we're going to do Red Sight. So I'm going to be chatting with Meredith, and we'll be discussing Red Sight. And I am so very, 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 very excited for that.
Good
Yes. So
job.
not next week, the week after. I'm doing my work, man. So same bad time, same bad channel, but not next week, week after, on a Wednesday, 7:30 p.m. And I hope you find your new, your next new favorite author on Paperback